So at the center, the main focus of this is the worship pavilion. Largest structure by the PUD, we can get the largest height of this building. This is the center point. So if you refer back to your wellness wheel, your wholeness wheel, Christ in the center, the worship space is a centered element in this site. So this blob here is indicative of maybe a covered pavilion that would seat about 1,000 people. And you're seeing some lines to the top or the plan north of it that are representing maybe some terrace landscaping that would allow us to accommodate additional overflow seating. You'll also notice that the lake has been expanded here to the right or to the east. So currently the lake is just about right here. And so this design provides for an expanded lake that is a major element on this site and would be used for a multitude of things, including even canoeing, kayaking, fishing, and those sorts of things. But nevertheless, it's a feature on the site that is a constant reference point. So if we go back to our wellness or wholeness wheel, we look at the center, we have radial axes that kind of extend out from this. And you'll start to see some of these components on the wheel start to have landing spots on the site plan. So directly north of the pavilion, we see youth and family services. And this would be our second phase 2 desired facility or building. And so looking on your wheel, you've got social, interpersonal up the top there. And that's really essentially what this zone of the site planning would encompass. If you look at the red on your sketch, you'll see kind of circled in the red all of those concepts landing on the site and where the buildings and facilities and the activities are tied to those concepts. So social, interpersonal, and family, youth and family services, very important. We're talking about facilities that would engage youth, maybe after school programs. You have daycare, you have Boys and Girls Club, multitude of things that happen there, group meeting rooms. This portion of the site works very well because what we started to initiate to the left of the diagram is the athletic field in this initial phase. And as we come into the site, you're going to see that we've started to implement or contemplate playground spaces. So the proximity of a youth building and a family building adjacent to what are the more recreational aspects of the site makes very good sense. You can picture an after-school care club, a multitude of maybe civic groups that are children related. You can simply use the building but then directly access the exterior of the building and enjoy the recreational amenities in the form of playground spaces. So having said that, as we pan to the left, going counterclockwise, we see the physical realm of this site developed that you can extract from the wholeness wheel. And so as we locate various playgrounds, we've got the developed edge of the lake starting to happen here. And you can see a fishing pier out here. I call it a picnic pavilion. Some of these target areas here on the site are conceptual landing spots for destinations and pavilions. We might call them follies. There are points of interest that house specific activities. So we have the physical area of the site here in that wholeness spiritual well-being model. As we pan the other direction, going clockwise, you can see the educational, vocational, and social services building. And this would be indicative of the intellectual and vocational component of this wholeness model. In this facility, you would have a multitude of training rooms, classroom settings, small group meeting rooms. Various social enterprises could be accommodated in this building in a multi-story fashion. And you could provide the necessary community services that you desire this park to have. These buildings here would be phased, and you'll see they have standalone parking sort of planned in their footprint zones. As we pan around to the here, you'll see we continue around. We have a communal section and aspect to this master plan. This parcel here has been designed and developed to accommodate parking. The parking here is servicing the demand for that worship pavilion. And based on the 1,000 seats, we're going to be looking at about 450 parking spaces just to accommodate and serve that worship building. So that lands here. We have sort of a circulation hub as we can get back in and get close to the worship building, there could be covered drop-off spaces. We have service access roads and fire department access needs that would happen here. In this community zone of the plan, we've got what I call a fellowship banquet food services building. And the purpose of that is to be able to bring the congregation into an air-conditioned setting that is simply banquet and fellowship related. It could also be a large group banquet hall that could be utilized by the community, could be rented out. And I envision a commercial kitchen in that facility that would allow caterers to come in and prep, allow even the community itself to be able to cook meals themselves and have potluck meals and luncheons and so forth. As you come back down to the south of this building, you'll see some squares developed here. Those are community raised bed gardens. And so to further incorporate the communal aspect of what we're doing, I've experienced these myself and have designed these for other projects in my nonprofit world of experience. They seem to be catching on and very popular, but it's a way to bring the community in. Raised bed gardening could happen here. And I see this as a very logical point in the master plan because the rest of the parcel here that extends down to the street to the south, we're looking at for maybe agricultural type uses, maybe hydroponic farming, something of that nature. So as we do those kinds of things, it directly relates to what may occur down here in close proximity. So let's go back to the worship center here. It's centralized on our site plan. To the south of it, you'll see a space here. It's a baptismal font. And so again, we're bringing a spiritual component into this. So we could actually provide a space that's a formal setting, a backdrop, if you will, for a small group for baptism type events. You'll also notice in the site plan that you've got these blue circles in and around the site plan. And so in looking at some of the concepts, the idea generating concepts for this site and the notion of Oil Well Road, this concept came to the table about the well. And we all understand, hopefully, what the significance of the well is in Scripture, as Jesus was entertaining the woman at the well and they were drawing water. And he used that time as a parable, as a teaching tool to make her understand that you're always going to thirst again by drinking this earthly, physical water, but he's the water of life. And so in this spiritual concept, the idea of water drawing on the notion of the well, what I'm proposing that we do is we locate in certain strategic areas as a point of reference, a frame of reference conceptually, that we bring back into this the idea of the well. Now I'm not suggesting we dig a well and have some conventional well, but the idea of a water feature, something of a water experience, fountains, reflecting ponds, combination thereof, something that people could see that is a consistent theme linking aspects of the park. And so, again, as we do these things, it's very important that the spiritual components of what the church stands for is replicated in the physical things that we build on the site. We want to provide those opportunities in a very smart way. Let's go back to the water edge. So we have a water baptism font here, if you will, or a formal setting. As you come along the lake edge here, you'll see the emotional component of that wholeness wheel set here. I've got a prayer garden or a prayer pavilion or something of a spiritual small group setting that could occur there in the emotional side of this campus design. Small groups, individual prayer. We've even looked at taking that wholeness wheel that you see in your diagram and replicating that in an actual physical, maybe hardscaped intervention next to the lake edge that you could walk and do a prayer walk through that labyrinth. This has been done all over the place in either hardscape form, meaning pavers or concrete. It's also been done in many churches with shallow hedgerow type plantings that actually sculpt that wholeness wheel and allow you to...
This is actually a labyrinth right here.
That is a labyrinth, correct, yeah. So either way, and we can show photos of that later at some point when we get further into it. So you'll see a bunch of red lines here around the drawing. Those would just be indicative of the interconnected pedestrian pathways. That would be very important. The interesting thing about this park is that all the components need to fit, tie in, they need to be homogeneous, they need to have some kind of synergy with each other. You need to have some kind of contiguous component. So the pedestrian paths do that. The lake is your reference point, so as you would walk around this lake, you're gonna experience some of these pavilions and destination points. So here we have a picnic pavilion. One of the criteria for the park was to have picnic destinations and grilling spots. And you can all recall the various county community parks that have pavilions. They're constantly rented for small group events, typically parties, birthday parties, and weekend holiday type gatherings. So think about those covered shelter environments that people could have small group gatherings along this lake. As I mentioned here, prayer pavilion, meditation spot, maybe the homeless labyrinth. As we continue on, we have the baptismal font. We have another picnic pavilion and grill area here. And then at the lake edge here, in close proximity to parking, for just practical use and needs, I've got what I call maybe a rest pavilion. That could be a pavilion that houses toilet rooms, maybe refreshments. It could also be a kayak and canoe launch. So to further make this lake an interactive space, we know that we have a desire here, or an interest has been expressed to have some kind of fishing type education and training, and you can see kids coming off of this fishing pier and casting line, but there could also be, boating activities here in the form of, non-motorized kayaks and rowboats for children.
Would you comment on Jose's parsonage over near the field, Tom? We discussed that last week.
Sure, so there's a desire and probably a very practical need as this is developed and built out to have really just what would you call it? What do we call it?
It could be a multi-purpose welcome.
A welcome center, introduction, yeah. So we talked around the idea of, what could this house become? Is it appropriate to keep it there? Do we just knock it down and use that site? I think we kind of talked around this idea of a welcome center, that when this site is built out, you're going to have a multitude of user groups coming in. You're going to have some housing needs here. Think about from the church side, if you have missionaries that kind of pass through the area as they're back in the U.S., kind of seeing all of their donors and funders, they have places they need to land and stop over and stay. You may have guest speakers that come in for certain trainings, certain ministry events. To have a welcome center that would have a residential component to it, I think would be really prudent and a good idea to plan. And so as somebody would come into the site, you could have a welcome center, or maybe a better word is an orientation spot that could get them into a place that gets them familiar with the campus, what's going on, what Emmanuel Communities is all about. All of the various social enterprises and partners that may be a part of this could have presentation type spots in this where there's an orientation to what's happening here in addition to those residential components. You could have green rooms, welcoming spots, small group meeting, conference spaces. Yeah.
And it does tie into, Nick, our discussions about transitional living. We call it hotel, but I think you said maybe, did you say up to 3 stories or some kind of half moon look that?
Yeah, based on the PUD, we're going to look at maybe up to 3 stories of any building we build.
Is this contemplated right now in the PUD efforts we're undergoing right now?
We have a couple of decisions to make in terms of how we do the revisions. And Howard is doing it both with our engineers, from a timing point of view, but also a cost point of view. We may save money, I think, Howard, we may save money by going more quickly and putting it all together, right? So that's being discussed, and you'll hear about that, I think, at our next meeting.
I want to point out one little last thing here, this little last footprint here. There's also been talk of maybe a third-party privatized post office setting, so big of a pack and ship type place. Located purposely by the road here so that there's easy in and out access for the community and it's visible. I don't think that something like this buried in the campus would be real user-friendly to people who want to go to those places quickly. So that's been located here, and as we talked about, the fire department may be having a home here with that 3 acres. So what would happen in the evolution of this plan is that we would start to take the parking demand and just shift it down further into the site here and allow the fire department to have the space that they would require.
As we close, because we are very close to closing time and closing prayer, we also know, Tom and Nick, that around this, we aren't showing the 60 to 80 acres of options that we're after. We have a plan to go after those now fairly quickly, and we have to get at that. But that comes into play, and there has to be synergy, of course, Tom
Sure.
and Nick,
Yeah.
between our plans, so that, again, building a healthy community with the park as the center service support center.
And I'll just offer this, I've been engaged with various little side projects in what I've been trying to contemplate as compact housing. And it's taking this affordable housing model, and I think you mentioned this, somebody mentioned the 1,700 square foot model. I've actually designed several projects incorporating models like that for the same purpose. Affordable housing, the needs of the modern day family, something that even millennials would entertain, or even people in the generation as a retirement place. But the point is that as we look to design affordable housing, how can we do that in this environment and what makes sense? So I'm right there with you in that planning and understand those needs very well.
Thank you, Tom.